So, let's begin. The author's purpose. When it comes to writing our essays for this particular assignment, we're going to be looking largely at a piece of literature that we've chosen, something that's been selected from, say, film, television, perhaps a play, something that's going to be appealing to a certain specific audience that we're going to create ourselves. And one thing we have to understand is when we're looking at a piece of literature, the first thing we need to know before we can truly understand how it would appeal to other people or whether the piece is even successful is what did the author hope to do with their piece of literature. Now, simplistically, an author's purpose is to either entertain somebody, inform somebody, or persuade somebody. And yes, the answer is they can do all of these at one particular time. For instance, is the entertainment meant to offer a unique interpretation of a historical event? Well, if it's a historical event, that would certainly provide you with a certain amount of information. It could be persuasive, persuading you to accept their interpretation or their retelling of a story, and it, of course, would hopefully be entertaining. Is the information meant to cause a person to make one choice or another? Well, that ability to persuade people to make a choice is usually executed through information, but the more you entertain somebody, the more you play to their emotions, the more likely you are to elicit the change that you want. And persuasion for societal change works the exact same way. The better the information is portrayed to somebody, the more it incites passion, it fires them up, it gets them concerned, gets them worried, whatever the case may be, it will be more successful. So they don't just merely do something under one of these three categories. They kind of float between the three categories and they embrace them all together to be able to be successful. I mean, whether you're watching The Avengers or An Inconvenient Truth, you're dealing with pieces that are entertaining, informative, and persuasive. It's just a matter of taking the time to break those parts down and look at them. So, when we're looking at a piece, it's our job first and foremost to figure out what the purpose is. The author is not going to tell us outright, and please don't relegate it to something as simplistic as their purpose is to make money. All right, given. In a film, a musical, television, a book, obviously they're hoping to make some sort of profit, but that's not what they're really hopefully after. If it is what they're after, then usually the piece isn't going to be that good in the first place. Usually there's something more that they're trying to accomplish. So we're going to look at four different avenues to achieve one's purpose, to look at a purpose of a person. We're going to look at diction, imagery, detail, and tone. There are other areas that could be addressed, but to keep things kind of focused on the writing element and putting together a very well-constructed essay argument as opposed to getting down to the nitty-gritty of literary analysis and talking about the stories and everything else like that completely, I'm going to keep it just focused on these four elements. I think it gives us plenty to work with for our first little step into an essay that's more custom and more toned to an English classroom as opposed to just, whether it be a generic situation or to a business style situation. So now let's look at these. Diction is probably one of the most difficult things for people to work with. Anytime they look at a word, they automatically think they're dealing with something that's diction. But diction actually has a lot more to it than just it being a word. I mean, just because someone chose a word doesn't mean that it adds anything unique or special to a particular conversation or anything that's going on. It requires that level of advanced connotation, that advanced meaning for it to actually qualify as a piece of diction. We've got some categories listed here: technical diction, formal diction, informal, familiar. Those are what they are. But I want to look at these statements under bullet point 2, because this is where I can really kind of bring to heart and all what I mean when I'm saying that connotation is actually more important than anything when we're going to actually determine that something's being affected and all through diction, through word choice. So we have this statement, I love you, but it's said in different ways. The first one, I love you, he said. Very simplistic, very matter of fact. I love you, he cooed. This is a little bit more saccharine. This is a case with somebody that's being flirtatious, obviously. Love you, he stammered. This is a case where obviously there's some uncomfortability. That's something where he's perhaps nervous. He's worried that he won't get the affection returned to him. It's that fear and all that's dwelling within him. And the word stammered is meant to help us understand just how nervous the person is saying this. Or he muttered. Hopefully that didn't come across too much other than just a muttering. This one I see a lot, especially if you go to a school, middle school or above with your kid and you're dropping them off, especially if it's a young man. He's got that cool image to keep intact. And I know my wife is pretty good at this one. She'll drop our son off and she'll say I love you to him right as she's getting ready to drop him off. Now, she could have said it a block away, but she's saying it right at that moment because that's when it matters most to her. He knows that if he doesn't say it back, she will get out of the car and walk with him until he says it back, which is far more embarrassing. So he says it, muttering it to accomplish the task, let it be known that he does love her, but not let the whole world be overly aware of it. And then, of course, I love you, he shouted. I'm going to try not to get much louder than that with a microphone in front of me. But in this particular case, you're professing to the entire world the love that you have for whatever it is you're loving. Each one of these cases, you've got a term that means speak. He said it. It's come from his mouth. But because we're using each of these different terms, we're changing the meaning of what I love you is, how it's perceived, what it's meant by, what the speaker's thoughts and feelings and emotions are regarding it, and that can impact the audience directly. I mean, if you go see a romantic comedy and the main character, he stammers, then you're going to perhaps find yourself a little bit more pulled into it and thinking, oh, that is so cute. He just can't get his love out. He loves her so much, but he's so afraid of her not returning the love. And the saccharine cood one, that's your Twilight stuff, where they kind of get flirtatious back and forth at each other. I mean, each one of these has unique meaning, and that's what I mean by connotation. It adds something very uniquely by it being there. It's not just an alternative thesaurus word for said. These are words that are intentional. They've been intentionally chosen so that they will elicit a specific response for the reader or the person hearing it. I mean, these are the type of commands and all that can help an actor make the part more authentic and more connected to what the writer actually wanted when they're delivering their lines. So this kind of rehashes what I just covered, the fact that each of the words is relatively unique. When you analyze diction, you have to figure out the author's word choice and what it contributes to the message, tone, and overall effect of the passage. What does it say, and what does it contribute to what's going on there? But also, what does it say to the audience? How is it going to impact the audience's three types of knowledge? How is it going to appeal to one of them? Now, you also have to be deliberate in how you talk about it. When you convey that diction is being used to affect an emotion or a change or something else like that, when you say that word choice is happening, you have to spell it out. You have to interpret it, and you have to make certain your words are very precise. Otherwise, you could defeat all the wonderful observations you've just made by using words that are in and of themselves too simplistic. 3 types of special diction. These are used, of course, with more regional-based situations. We have slang, words like sup, and from what I understand, you have to put that at the end of it. Dialect, these are more regionally based, things like y'all. I know most people, when they come down to Texas and all, especially if you get closer to the coast, there's a lot of words that we use that the rest of the world does not use. I think one of the ones I'm most familiar with is fixin' to. Fixin' to this, fixin' to that. It's our substitution for going to. It's fixin' to. I've known plenty of people that have moved to Texas and gone, I don't know how you're supposed to be fixin' to do anything. And then give them a year or two, and they're fixing to do all sorts of things. And then finally we have jargon. This is the medical-based language or computer-based, technology-based. These are the languages that are for particular groups of people, and it denotes the fact that that person is within that particular group. And you watch something, I can't really speak for Grey's Anatomy. Sorry, never seen it. But like ER, Chicago Hope, things like that, the medical jargon they use, it's to kind of let you know that these are the people that belong in the hospital. And instead of the person's bleeding, they use some sort of terminology and all to identify just what type of bleeding it is to help them be able to treat the situation much better. Imagery is one of my favorite. I've said before, I love pathos. And I think imagery certainly affects this. And we've looked at the Langston Hughes piece, Salvation, and imagery is what made that piece so vivid, as you pictured that church and how hot it was and the kids, the sweat and everything else like that. Here's the thing. Imagery has been really simplified by our society. It is not just visual. It is not just creation of an image. It is playing to any of the senses. Sight, smell, taste, touch, ability to hear. All these things play directly into imagery. Take the example, eating roasted marshmallows with the outside crunchy and the inside creamy, melt in your mouth gooiness. Could kind of conjure up that marshmallow. I mean, for me, I don't picture just a simple marshmallow. I picture marshmallows like I like them, where you set the things on fire and you run around the campfire with the stick blazing with the little marshmallow on top, and then you blow it out just before the last little ember falls out. And then you put the sucker in your mouth and all just before it even has time to cool down. It's got that crunchy taste to it. That's what I picture when I hear this. It brings it in. It gives me that homey feel. It gives me that feel of connecting to my past memories. And in that sense and all, not only it played my sense of, emotion, but it plays to my sense of logic. And it may even play to my sense of values if I associate eating that marshmallow in that context with spending time and all with my family and friends. And it makes me have that feeling of closeness to what I consider my heart, my true values, my soul. Imagery plays more than just visual. It plays in many arenas. It's a great tool for literary analysis, especially if you're going to decide to work with a piece for this assignment that is visual, a movie, play that already exists and all, or something like that, television show. I mean, the more video game, the more visual it is. Obviously, imagery, the images present on the screen are going to impact you, but the ability for it to override even beyond that is going to be important. I mean, think about it. When you go to a movie, if it has a horrible soundtrack, are you going to be as into it as you are to a movie that has a great soundtrack? I bet not. And even, this is less funny, even things that aren't directly related, like the smell of the popcorn, the taste of it, the crunch, that can impact it and make that particular piece much more successful than it was without it. Detail. Detail usually goes with other things like diction, figurative language, and imagery. It kind of pairs right alongside them because basically detail is adding more information to it to make it clearer. It makes it something that is more perceivable and understood. I mean, in imagery, it's, if you just say fire truck, somebody's going to picture it. But if you start, when you really want vivid imagery, you're going to need to invoke some detail. I mean, you probably want to talk about, the sparkling red fire engine with the lights blaring and so horns a-blowing went flying down the interstate frantically. Well, I'm going to imagine suddenly not only just that red fire truck, but I'm going to see that sucker and all moving back and forth and all down the highway as it's heading to wherever it's going. Hear the sirens going and see the lights flashing. It's going to make it that much more vivid and that much more realistic. Same thing with diction. The more details you provide, the more information you provide, the easier it is to understand not only the connotation, the meaning, but also why it is unique meaning. I mean, if you give me details to create a setting where I'm inside of a hospital, then of course I'm going to understand its medical jargon I'm dealing with. So those things can be important. Here's another case of it, and this kind of helps jump between the three different things we've looked at. In the case of detail, I've got Robbie reached for the ball, successfully took possession, pulled it to his chest, looked at the basket, aimed through, and watched it drop through the rim to score the winning points. So play-by-play. It's just a replay, play-by-play. Here's what we saw happen. Not a lot of extra emphasis, word choice, or anything else like that. Try some evocative diction. Desperate to win, Robbie lunged for the ball. In this particular case, you can see the desperation in his eyes and all because of the word choice that's being here. And using the word lunged as opposed to just reach toward or just grab the ball, it lets you know that he moved for it with a level of high desperation to get his hands on that particular ball so that he could do whatever needed to be done on his role to win. And then imagery, Robbie felt the round, nubby ball as his hands curled around the worn leather, hugged it protectively to his chest, and then lobbed it toward the basket. If you've played basketball with a basketball that has been, worn down like that, one of the old school ones, they were always my favorite to play with and on middle school and high school just because I love the way they felt in my hands and all. And I seem to have a little bit better ability to get them into a basket that way. It brings back that connection to it. I mean, yes, these are words that are being chosen to, make it come alive, but there's not any real unique meaning behind them. They're just words. You could argue that they're details, because certainly they are, but they're details that are being used to convey this imagery, this, picture of this basketball. Again, we mentioned that detail can be mixed with many other things, has no particular meaning or connotation in and of itself, etc., etc. Another slide on detail. I do like the purpose for details as a matter of interpretation. An example, the child walked home through the forest, singing, collecting wildflowers, looking for berries, and enjoying the sunshine. What are the details and the purpose? Well, the purpose could be many different things. That's kind of up to her grabs, but the details certainly would be everything from where she's walking, what she's doing while she's walking, what type of flowers she's collecting, the berries she's looking for, and the fact that the sun's shining. It's giving us details about what it looks like. Obviously, I would think the purpose of this would be to inform us about the surroundings and perhaps even entertain us a little bit. Excuse me. Tone. Tone is one of those things that's kind of difficult sometimes for people to grasp, but I'm going to make it simple for you. It's mood. It's the feelings. It's the feels. How does it make you feel about a situation? All sorts of different terms can be used to help convey tone, but all that really comes back down to is, what does it sound like? How are you speaking? How are the words being shared? How are they being represented on the page? Oral tone, when you speak, your words convey a tone to your listener. Like right now, mine's kind of a steady tone, doesn't seem very alarming. I'm trying to be a little bit more on the informative side, feel kind of relaxed, at the same time presenting some important information. If instead, I yelled real loud and got really stressed out, well, suddenly it's not so much of a calm situation. I've just changed the mood completely. Well, then that changes it too. It sets it. Oral tone's easy because we can modify it with facial expressions, hand gestures, and our voice. Written tone, not so easy. We have to do it with words. So we have to be very mindful of what's being said and what's coming across in a written tone situation. So I say this not so much for this particular essay with written tone, but it will play in a little bit more when we move to the final essay for the course. Oral tone is what you're going to be working with more than likely for this assignment, because I think many of you are going to either choose films, video games. You may choose a play or a piece of drama, but it's probably going to be in something that you can put into a DVD player or watch, or you can go sit and watch. Imagine it's going to be mostly oral-based tone that you're going to be partaking of. But written tone is something we need to be aware of because it is difficult sometimes to track down, and that's one of those cases where you really have to tone in the diction and imagery and detail just to see what they're doing and see what you're supposed to feel, what the mood is of the environment. A little info on recognizing tone. I've got the example. I want you to be aware that I know you have treated me infernally. Infernally! Do you hear? And if you flatter yourself that I don't perceive it, you are a fool. And if you think I can be consoled by sweet words, you are an idiot. And if you fancy I'll suffer unrevenged, I'll convince you of the contrary in a very little while. I'm going to be kind of interested to see what y'all think about the tone in that particular one. I'll be honest, I don't think I'm going to sleep with that person in a room near me. This is somebody that is obviously very upset, very mad, and they are very much after revenge. However, they seem to be desiring the ability to shock you a little bit with it. So you've certainly got this angry tone at the start of it, and then it moves into something I think a lot more sinister, a lot more wicked. Again, when you're asked to identify tone, try to use labels to correspond with the intensity of the word. Don't just say they're mad, say they're furious. There's a chart and all that I'll place. I'll get up onto the thread that you can look at and all if we have a lot of people that are expressing an interest in tone. It's Tone Wheel. You can actually even Google Tone Wheel, and it provides some alternative terms that you can use and all for words like mad and sad and glad and things like that. All right, I'm going to pause here for a moment since they're at 20 minutes, and I will be back on video number 2. See you in a few.